Missing and never heard from again. That's what happened to thousands of people who have disappeared in Colombia's more than 40-year-old civil war. A struggle involving armed revolutionary groups, government forces and right-wing paramilitaries. All sides said the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights are responsible for serious human rights violations. Many of the missing are killed, forcibly recruited or kidnapped for ransom by left-wing revolutionary insurgents. But many experts will say that some 7,000 cases of enforced disappearance, at least in years past, have been part of a strategy used mostly by right-wing paramilitaries, at times with help or consent from elements of the state security forces. Fabiola Lalinde's son went missing in a classic case of politically motivated disappearance. Her nightmare began all the way back in 1984.
There was a news item on TV about disappearances in Argentina. I said to my son, Luis Fernando, what a horror this is in Argentina, that they can take your child and make him disappear forever. He said, Mom, this happens in Colombia too. But I didn't believe him.
Witnesses say Luis Fernando, a 26-year-old leftist organizer, was beaten, tied and taken away in a military truck. Military authorities denied any knowledge of this, claiming instead that on that day a guerrilla fighter codenamed Jacinto had been killed while escaping custody. A hard-working clerk in a private firm, Mrs. Lalinde had never confronted authority. She was about to embark on the fight of her life. She began painstakingly collecting evidence, writing petitions, knocking on doors. Documenting her every step, she followed a paper trail that gradually led her to believe that Luis Fernando had been viciously tortured and murdered by Colombia's own security forces.
My message to them was this: I will never stay still, I will never rest until I find Luis Fernando. I will look for him always.
In Medellin, Colombia, there are now hundreds of mothers who, like Mrs. Lalinde, keep looking for their children and demanding to know what happened to them. Calling themselves the Mothers of La Candelaria, they follow in the footsteps of the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo in 1970s Argentina. And as in Argentina, they face a hard struggle to pinpoint those responsible for the disappearances, let alone bring them to justice. A struggle that is even more difficult here in Colombia, says this member of the Mothers of La Candelaria movement, because of the number of armed groups in the country.
Here in Colombia, we have a variety of illegal armed groups: paramilitaries, guerrilla fighters, criminals, narco-traffickers, and to some extent, the state itself.
Initially, it was a weapon used to get rid of political opposition, of people who criticize the state.
Rocío Pineda is a human rights expert for the region surrounding Medellin, one of the hardest hit.
Now people disappear for any reason. They are made to disappear to resolve political problems, money problems, over daily issues.
No matter the reason, the Mothers of La Candelaria have come together to fight for the right of every mother to know what happened to her child. They believe that the mother of a government soldier like Maria Inés, whose son was kidnapped 10 years ago, has as much a right to know as anyone. One of their leaders, Teresita Gaviria, remembers how she felt after her 15-year-old son, Christian Camilo, disappeared in the year 2000.
I would lock myself in my house and in my office and cry for days on end. I was dying of anguish, and then I realized this was not the way. I said to myself, if I don't go out there and protect for my son, who will do it? If I don't keep his memory alive, who will?
For Mrs. Lalinde, keeping her son's memory alive meant 4 years of petitioning until an international commission finally found the Colombian state responsible for the forced disappearance and execution of her son. It would take another 4 years of petitioning for authorities to agree to exhume the body they still insisted belonged to an unknown guerrilla fighter, Jacinto. And it took 4 more years of struggle until Mrs. Lalinde, with the help from a top geneticist in the United States, could prove to the world that the 69 bones pictured here belonged to her son, Luis Fernando Lalinde.
This is how they gave me back the body of the young man you see in the picture. You tell me if that isn't enough to give a woman the courage to face any obstacle.
It took Mrs. Lalinde 12 years to get to the truth about what happened to her son. But what about justice?
Justice was never done. The only officers responsible are those who have already died.
Today, Mrs. Lalinde hopes that her tenacity can be an example for others. But taking on established powers the way Mrs. Lalinde did can seem impossible in the isolated rural areas where most of Colombia's disappearances take place. In this community called La Esperanza, 16 people disappeared in a space of 6 months in 1996. The families are left with little information and without knowing where to turn for help. All that's left in these hills is fear and emptiness, says Flor Gallego Hernandez, who lost her husband and several other relatives.
It's the worst thing they can do to you, the cruelest. We're left in total darkness, without even a glimmer of light to find peace of mind.
A spark of hope has emerged as Colombia's government has over the last years taken control of many areas held by guerrilla groups and demobilized the paramilitary forces. While many say the paramilitaries have not been rooted out, some of their leaders have revealed new information about mass graves and other burial sites. And this has led to a new challenge for Colombia's institutions, now faced with a flood of requests for criminal investigations. Oscar Joaquin Hidalgo is a forensic anthropologist in Medellin.
We've got a work plan for this year that calls on us to deal with 150 requests for exhumations.
And that's for one region alone. Hidalgo knows the work that he's doing is dangerous. Only a few years ago, a group of 7 colleagues working in a region in the northeast of the country never came back from one assignment. The sense of danger is so pervasive that to this day many people, up to 80%, never even report their family members as missing.
We'll find 15 bodies at a given site, and out of those, 3 will have been reported as disappeared, and the other 12 haven't even been reported as missing.
Prosecutor Leondario Mason says that in order to prove cases of enforced disappearance, what's needed are more forensic specialists and more equipment as well.